Jihan stood firm, immobile as a statue, with his uniform impeccable and his gaze fixed on the horizon. His place was at the gates of the royal palace, and his duty was to protect the most powerful family in the kingdom. Tourists watched him curiously. Some took pictures while others tried to get a smile out of him. But Jihan remained stoic. It was his job, his life, or so he thought. But behind the facade of discipline, Jihan's heart was a battlefield. Every day he felt the invisible weight of a war that no one saw. Since his wife's death, he could hardly find a reason to go on. Grief ate him from the inside, and though he stood like a human shield, inside he was fragile, broken. There were nights when the shadows seemed to whisper to him, mocking his loneliness. He did not sleep well, and when he did, the dreams were dark and suffocating. In his small apartment, there was barely a trace of the life he once had. The photos of his wife remained on the walls, but the flowers in the vase were withered, as was his mood. Work, once his refuge, had become a prison. Every military salute, every march in the scorching sun or freezing rain, seemed like an endless ordeal. No one noticed the cracks in his soul, not even his co-workers. After all, Jihan was the perfect guard, always present, always ready. But perfection was only a mask. One particularly cold winter day, Jihan was at his usual post. The icy air cut into his skin, but he didn't move. As the laughter of tourists echoed around him, he felt a wave of despair swirl inside him. His thoughts were a whirlwind of self-loathing and anguish. Suddenly, a terrible thought struck him with the force of lightning. What was the point of going on? No one would notice him if he disappeared. He was one man among millions, an anonymous face in the sea of the city. That night, he decided it would be his last. When he got home, he turned out the lights and sat down in the gloom. On the table in front of him, he left a letter he had written months before, but never had the courage to complete. As he held a metal object in his hand, tears began to roll down his face. For the first time in years, he let the pain consume him. But just as he was about to succumb, something unexpected happened. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. It was late, and he wasn't expecting visitors. With a frown, he got up to open it, more out of curiosity than desire. When he turned the knob, he found something he would never have imagined. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, shivering on the threshold. The girl looked up at him, her eyes large and tearful. Her hair was tangled, and her coat seemed too thin for the weather. "Are you a royal guard?" she asked in a trembling voice. Jihan nodded, unable to articulate a word. The girl pulled a crumpled note from her pocket and handed it to him. As Jihan read it, he felt his heart stop. It was a letter her mother had written before she passed away, asking whoever found her to take care of her daughter. "My mother is not here," the girl whispered. "I was told that the royal guards always take care of people. Can you help me?" Jihan didn't know what to say. For the first time in a long time, he felt something stronger than his own pain. The girl was alone, just like him, but she still retained an innocence he had lost long ago. Without thinking too much about it, he let the girl in. He made her a hot tea and a blanket. As the little girl told her story, Jihan noticed that the weight in his chest began to ease. That night, instead of succumbing to the darkness, he stayed awake watching over her. That night, as the little girl slept on her couch wrapped in the warmest blanket he could find, Jihan sat quietly, watching her. His mind was full of questions. How had she gotten here? Why wasn't her mother with her? What was he to do now? The life of a royal guard had not prepared him for this. The next morning, as the first ray of sunlight illuminated his apartment, Jihan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: purpose. He prepared a simple breakfast and waited for the girl to wake up. "What's your name?" he asked as she devoured a piece of toast with jam. "Amelia," she answered with her mouth full. "My mother always said I have a princess name." The mention of her mother made the girl's eyes darken. but Jihan distracted her by asking her more about her favorite things. Stories, colors, animals. Little by little, the little girl relaxed, and Jihan realized that, in her innocence, Amelia had a strength he had forgotten. That night, as the little girl slept on his couch wrapped in the warmest blanket he could find, Jihan sat quietly, watching her. His mind was full of questions. How had she gotten here? Why wasn't her mother with her? What was he to do now? The life of a royal guard had not prepared him for this. The next morning, when the first ray of sunshine lit up his apartment, Jihan felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: purpose. He prepared a simple breakfast and waited for the girl to wake up. "What's your name?" he asked as she devoured a piece of toast with jam. "Amelia," she answered with her mouth full. "My mother always said I have a princess name." The mention of her mother made the girl's eyes darken, but Jihan distracted her by asking her more about her favorite things. Stories, colors, animals. Little by little, the girl relaxed, and Jihan realized that, in her innocence, Amelia had a strength he had forgotten. As the days passed, Amelia began to fill Jihan's apartment with an energy he had forgotten existed. They painted together, made up stories, and even laughed. However, Jihan couldn't ignore the missing pieces of his story. He discovered, through a police officer friend, that Amelia's mother had been an immigrant who worked long hours to support her daughter. She had died in a recent accident, and Amelia had escaped from the house where she had been temporarily left. Amelia's grief resonated with him like an echo of his own loss, but instead of sinking him, it drove him. He decided he would do everything he could to give the girl a future, even if it meant bucking the rigid rules that governed his life as a guard. One day, while walking in a nearby park, Amelia saw a woman crying on a bench. She approached her and offered her a flower she had picked from the ground. "Don't be sad," she said with disarming gentleness. "Bad things happen, but then good things come." The woman, surprised, thanked him and began to talk to John about her own problems. It was then that Jihan realized that Amelia was not only saving him, but also those around her. Her light, small but powerful, was changing lives. However, not everything was simple. Jihan knew that sooner or later he would have to face reality. He couldn't stay with Amelia forever. Social services were insisting that she should be placed in foster care. The thought tormented him. In an act of desperation and courage, Jihan presented himself to his superiors at the royal palace. He told his story honestly, laying bare not only his situation, but also his own internal struggles. "I have spent years protecting these gates, this symbol of power and tradition. But now I understand that protecting means something more," he said in a trembling voice. "I want to be the guardian of something more important, this child's hope." The room fell silent. To Jihan's surprise, one of the senior officers, a man who always seemed cold and distant, spoke in an unexpectedly soft tone. "Jihan, what you have done is more noble than many of us have accomplished in our lives. We will do what we can to help you." With the support of his superiors and some local charities, Jihan was able to obtain temporary custody of Amelia. Although he knew there were still challenges ahead, he felt he was ready to face them. Amelia, for her part, seemed to have found in Jihan not only a protector, but a family. With each passing day, the two helped each other heal, discovering that even in the midst of the greatest storms, a light could be found.